So we have a really exciting panel for you today. We're going to be talking about using AI to catalyze better food outcomes. My name is Jim Harris. I'm an international best-selling author. I just had a webinar with one of my partners 6 weeks ago that broke 1.1 million views on YouTube, The AI Revolution with Jim Harris, so you can look that up. We're going to be giving you use cases with either bottom line benefit or societal benefit, and we're going to have these case studies and then some discussion, and then hopefully some questions from you as an audience. So with that, why don't we start with you, Fiona? Just introduce yourself and what you do in one or two sentences, and then what is the case study you want to throw in to the mix to begin with?
I don't know if we need the mics, but my name is
We
Fiona.
need them because this is being recorded and it'll
Yes.
go up on the World Wide Web, this new great thing that we have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's Fiona Banister. I started originally, I worked in Asia and down in Africa, and I was a political journalist and a photographer. And then I went into food, water, sanitation. I would work with families finding their children being sold for prostitution and buying them back. And I was very young at the time. And I went back to how do you feed these families? How do you build it up? And so years later, I worked in microfinance, built small investment banks that were doing that food, water, sanitation, health, and then everything food, water, sanitation, health, education, but it was really food, water, sanitation. And the core was the example right now. Let's come back to where we are today is my team of Indigenous leaders that are part of my community that I've been working with in microcredit and helping to, or I'd say they're teaching me. Let's just be really honest. They're teaching me or us about the value of their foods, about the value of their medicines, the tribal medicines in the rainforests, whether it be in different places. So the last 4 years, part of one of my NGOs, decarbonized.org, we launched with partnershipsforchange.org, which is another of our nonprofits. We launched a team for the international prize of the X Prize Rainforest Conservation. So we did the only open source team that worked on biodiversity conservation. From the satellite, we went from down with drones under the canopy of the rainforest. We worked with NASA and technology with Rainforest Connection. We went with our environmental DNA scientists. We measured and monitored the value of the water, the microbial, down to the soil and the fungi. And the plant medicines were one of our great extra ingredients, of course, because I, with my gift of my friendship, have access to some of the rarest plant medicines and plants and that have yet to be decided what they're used for. But we curated that, and the core for us was our attempt to look at a fair boundary of ethics of AI, of who's procuring and monitoring or measuring or extracting data out of what we all need, and where's the open source value, and how does each one of those individual parties, whether it be the Indigenous peoples, whether it be the plants, because they have a value, or all the way through who's in control. And I guess the other side down was on our team, Nayara Tucunu, who is a co-leader of the team. She's from the Tucunu tribe in Brazil. She's a social justice environmental lawyer. Hector Vargas in Ecuador. He also, I've known him for 20 years, and Hector is also an environmental lawyer, social justice lawyer, anthropologist, and a leader of the Quechua nations. And I gather there's the rights of nature laws that were passed also in Ecuador, and that brings to us a whole bouquet. Sorry for this, it's a very octopus brain I have, but what I've learned is that this is the core issue. When we sue large oil companies in Ecuador for spilling that are causing destruction of the rainforests, or when we're in Africa or in India, who's actually accountable for all this economic value, because today it's also about how do we feed the world, where does the security, and how does AI implement or support it. So in a way, we needed some of this AI to provide it, but we needed the environmental DNA, microbiology tests to actually be able to bring it to court to say, Mr. X, Company Y, you're responsible. Here's the value of the assets that you have just destroyed, and this is what we need you to be accountable for. This is what our cleanup plan is. This is how we're going to work with technology, even with AI, to monitor or measure it, or the chain of governance. So it's very much about environmental, social governance. And so it's still, and then we'd like a biodiversity set of credits that are not mandated by a second or third tier voluntary market on carbon credits, because carbon is not feeding the world. We need to do food and water and health.
Fiona, what a far-ranging discussion as an opening comment. Wow, this is great.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the exciting innovations that you catalyze with AI for the UN food program.
Absolutely. No, my name is Bernhard Kowatsch, head of the World Food Program's Innovation Accelerator. Now, I should say the journey that brings me to the passion and like also to what we do is on the one hand talking about the problems and like Fiona, you were mentioning this, like unfortunately there's lots of problems still on the planet. Global hunger being one of them, but it's actually a solvable problem in a lot of cases, which we haven't tackled. Now, World Food Program, if you don't know, is like, this is where whenever you hear in the news the UN delivers food, whether it's in Ukraine, in Sudan, in Venezuela, Afghanistan, it's the World Food Program. So my team, we're actually working with startups, but also internal teams, NGOs, on finding those, and we can talk about, it's like, trying to find like transformative kind of breakthrough innovations that can help us either make emergency response a lot more efficient and effective, or sustainably ending hunger. And like we've been using AI, fascinatingly enough, for years, just that nobody cared about this. And just to say, 3 quick examples. One is for hunger monitoring, so you can actually look this up, hungermap.wfp.org. You can actually look in real time right now in the global south, how is hunger evolving, or even on regional level. And we use AI doing this, and now even looking into the future, like forecasting food security. Second thing is for optimizing supply chains for us, where we've used machine learning algorithms in the past already, but now also using AI to really get to the next level of saving money. One cool AI use case for one commodity in West Africa, we were just able to save $2 million in the first pilot. And that's when, it is interesting when you think about, well, we saved $2 million that you reinvest into like more food for people. And then lastly, it's also about startups, where a lot of startups we work with, you can now democratize access for people. So one of the startups we work with, Ignitia, they use satellite imagery AI, and they've built weather models for rural parts of Africa, where they now can give farmers, like smaller farmers, weather alerts in terms of like a storm is coming, or like you should harvest now, and also making it accessible through text messages and symbols. So like even if you can't read and write, all of a sudden they are having access to precision agriculture information. And that's where I think I'm also taking a lot of hope from this, where it's like, talking about AI, talking about some of the big problems, there's actually solutions that we can use right now.
So some people might think the UN is a not-for-profit, but if you spend millions of dollars on food, and you can save $2 million in this initial project, that's $2 million more of food that you can buy to feed people. So AI can have this huge positive benefit. And you mentioned precision farming, and for people who don't know what that is, that's using technology and AI to get better outcomes or yields in farming. So for instance, you can fly a drone over fields with a 4K camera and an infrared sensor and see, oh, these plants here are water stressed, so rather than having to water your entire acreage, you just water where the water stressed. Or here we have a pest infestation, and rather than spray the historical way, pesticides over everything, you just deal with it in this little area. So you can reduce your water and pesticide costs by significant, like pesticide, more than 90%, which then has better outcomes. It's not organic, but it's less non-organic. Anyways, these are examples. So coming back to you, Fiona, so you're using AI and this part of this X Prize. What are some of the other applications for AI that you see will help catalyze better food outcomes for the world or for regions?
So I want to just cut in. We only made it through to the semifinals of the X Prize, which was in Singapore. And we were the only open source team. And one of the things that our team collectively learned was, as an open source team, there are human greed. And when you look at AI, we've often talked about the ethics of AI and AI with empathy, but AI also is very expensive. Let me just say, so if I calculated the hundreds of people that worked on our team for free, worked at different universities, our scientists that work for free, or they're paid at least in their university position, for the indigenous peoples who weren't necessarily paid to participate, AI has a differentiation. It is not equality. And that's the problem with AI, because most people don't have in the world access to a high-speed internet, nor a storage system, nor a computer that can process the data. Even for me, we had so many drones, so much data coming through our cameras, our LiDAR. We had the environmental DNA machines pushing through samples. That is highly elitist. My apologies for saying it, because that is a reality. And so AI has so many applications, but it's who gets to use it. And then one of the things, just the prize itself had a structure where it was 24 hours of collection. So we had to only 24 hours and 100 hectares. The core was that when you go in that much, is then I had to cut out certain technology. For example, we had fantastic team in the world that does specific like LiDAR camera traps, but because they're so slow and bigger field and they take too much speed and too much power to go through on the AI, I wouldn't be able to process that amount of data as fast as, and then we had to use supercomputers. Do you know how many supercomputers are in the world and who controls them? So you get into geopolitics, because, and then you're using drones, and now that is geopolitics again. So years back when we co-financed certain projects which were doing land entitlement, looking at the value of land and being able to land title and give microloans and supporting farmers and families, or to have access to their rights, it's very much a challenge. And then on another side, I've had experience in working with a group like ExtoLab, ExtoPay, doing payment plans for uplifting, banking families and farmers and communities and cooperatives. So I think there's a lot, when I come to AI and its use case, we're moving forwards, but the cost of AI has to come down, but we're talking data. And so how valuable is also the amount of training that it takes to upskill people to be able to process that kind of data? It's phenomenal. So I think it's a whole, it's a very abstract world to talk through it, but there's a lot of solutions. So I will drive into some solutions. So upskilling using small AI.
Let's save that for the next round.
Yeah.
Because I just want to jump in with, years ago here in Davos, I was sitting next to somebody at a lunch. Turns out he was an investor, and he told me all about M-Pesa in Kenya. So 75% of Kenyans had no bank account, and basically the cell phone company, Safari, allowed people to send and receive money using their Nokia feature phones, so not even a smartphone, which all of a sudden turned the 20,000 mobile kiosks in the country into, in essence, banks. And the system grew so fast, it went on to facilitate a quarter of the GDP of the country. So you've talked about open source, although this wasn't open source. I see it opening possibilities to people and democratizing, for instance, banking. So coming to you, what examples from the UN democratize people being able to access food or reduce, say, slippage in a food system or something like that?
No, and I think it's a very interesting question because, like, as I was mentioning before, like, wherever you hear the UN is delivering food, like, that's literally us. And like, the unfortunate truth is, like, the last 8 years, hunger has actually been rising. So, and like, the three big reasons for that is like wars and conflicts, climate change, and like also economic inequality, like inflation and things like that. And when you think about like some of these root causes, like, yes, you need to tackle the root causes, and at the same time, we need to make sure that every dollar you spend goes further, like as much as you can. So, what is interesting, like, and this is something where some of these technologies are also sometimes seen with suspicion, or like maybe not it's the most obvious, but for instance, in a lot of countries where we operate, like, it's last year at World Food Program we provided a total of $2.9 billion of cash transfers. So cash transfers could be cash cards, M-Pesa, could be like people theoretically also getting physical cash, but also like essentially like blockchain wallets that we're using for payments. And then for authentication, like, there's different mechanisms that we're using in terms of like, how do you register the people? Like, how do you prove that you're there? Like, sometimes we also use biometrics, whether it's like a fingerprint or an iris scan, right? And just to say what is interesting about these cash transfers, like, it's not just, sometimes it's also about the time, it's about the payments fees that you're saving, and it's also about making sure that if you are in these types of environments, that we're actually very efficient and like effective in the type of work that we're doing. Just the one blockchain wallet that we've been using as an example, we're now using this in Ukraine as a ID and a deduplication mechanism. Like, what that means is that the same person that goes to, let's say, UNHCR to Save the Children and Oxfam for the same service, then they say like, oh, wait a second, you already got this from the other one, so you're not supposed to get this. And by doing this in Ukraine, we've been able to identify $180 million of potentially duplicate transactions that did not happen. And so that actually like means that, they supported other people that actually needed the service, right? And like, this is what, I mean, I think when talking about technology, AI, blockchain, whatever it actually is, it has to solve a real problem. But at the same time, I think there's opportunities that are not obvious, because like this kind of like this, having an identity, like financial inclusion, like there's lots of different things you can talk about.
Well, I love this example because it means that people who weren't able to access food will be,
Yes.
because other people had been getting 3 servings.
Potentially.
Potentially. Yeah. So I also like the microfinance. Muhammad Yunus was here in Davos one year. He was at one of our dinners. He won the Nobel Prize, of course, for microfinance. And what was interesting is when you have peer-based and community-based lending, the default rate is next to 0, whereas, on Wall Street, huge defaults. So it is actually a community-building tool. So I'm excited about technologies like M-Pesa because it empowers community. I'm excited about microfinance because it empowers and builds community, because if Juan gets a loan to buy a goat, we all get our goat milk from Juan because we were the lenders to Juan for the goat. So it builds community. So
I'm going to just say,
yeah,
I want to just gift you, our group was part of one of the success stories for India, building out the most advanced platform originally for money on mobile. Cool. So it's, what's interesting is that, so from the tech and the advancement, and now coming with the next generation of payments. So we did start at $50 loans, $5,000 loans, 50 million, and it raised up to over 100 million users. And then, that story went public on the New York Stock Exchange. I don't want to get into the politics of what happens, but I want to look at the new evolution. So I am a shareholder, so I will speak that, of Exto Labs and Ethereum. We have some, not Ethereum, sorry, my dyslexia, Ethernom. And Ethernom is a technology that actually uses some of the patents of the iris and the biometrics for the most advanced smart cards that actually has a chip on the card, which has a 5,000 meter mesh network. So somebody think about jumping 5,000 meters, so that people can make transactions without the internet. It's Bluetooth, and it can then do a convergence. And so it takes one, let's take it a satellite, think of a satellite coming down. It showers out, and we can set up different pods that build out what is then called series of hubs. And those hubs, we have a technology that evolves that, and each one of those cards can actually transact from each other. And so we can not only do financial transactions, but we've taken away a part where most of the world still don't have access to a cell phone. And we don't have access to that. We've expanded it so we can do health services. We can come in and do an iris scan back on them, or work with the doctor or the scientist to help with quick analysis and treatment and food opportunity and the payments, disaster relief payments that could go off to offshore islands. So, and the biometrics, so you do know who gets access to that, where the money got in there. Sorry about the corruption side, or that the wallet is locked by the identity of that mother who has 6 kids, and she's getting every penny for each one of those 6 kids, and it's not taken out by anybody else. So every time she goes and does a transaction, it's with her fingerprints, and they go directly to her and that transaction. So it does have a positive use. There's a lot of negativity about biometrics, but there's some really great, important parts to it. So thank you. Yeah.
So one of the interesting things is when digital payments were brought in, in numerous case studies, the individuals receiving payment said, hey, we're getting more money. And that's because when you had the old currency base, the paymaster was skimming 10 points off before distributing money. So the digitization of finance allows for tracking and verification of who's actually getting it. The other thing, talking about irises, AI enables us to look at an iris and say this person has diabetes. This is more for a North American case study, but 18% of the total U.S. healthcare budget is just around diabetes. But or you have hypertension, or you're going to have a heart problem. So we can tell a lot from the iris. The Sufi saying is, the soul, the eyes are the gateway to the soul. Also, they're apparently the gateway to our health. So, does anybody know when we finish exactly? Because I haven't been tracking.
And may have another 5 minutes or something.
Okay, so we're gonna take one more case study and then some final comments. And it's been actually great to be here in Davos Lodge with Greek House and Monaco together, combining this year. So very exciting. So our final case study here.
So, and it's just as some broadening the inspiration, like picking up on the microfinance example that you were mentioning. Like this is something where a lot of times, like the people that the World Food Program serves, they are excluded from microfinance. Why? Because they are poor, they are hungry, they don't have assets or any physical assets that you can actually loan against, right? So what we actually started now, this is maybe 2 years ago, is a program we call She Can, where it's specifically about providing microfinance loans to people, World Food Program serves specifically women. And what's exciting about this is like, so we've been using like grant funding like to de-risk some of the initial loan giving, but also as you were pointing out, like so far we've had like, 10,000 like loans given out to like to women, like, financial inclusion training, and 99.9% repayment rate. So if and this is like where exactly what you're saying in terms of, yes, there's a big opportunity out there, and it's actually, of course, ideally, we want to have patient capital. You want to have, interest rates that are okay. You don't want to have like extremely high interest rates, but like there's a huge opportunity out there, which is, combine this with like, cash transfers, combine this with maybe with AI, maybe, financial inclusion, like they have a history of repaying those loans, so therefore they can build up a future, right? And I think this is one of the examples that gives me hope in terms of like also, how can we get more, maybe investors into this that say like, well, maybe, because that's one of the issues, like maybe the risk-adjusted interest rate for a remote area in the global south might be like 40% per annum. So maybe they're willing not to have 40% per annum, but maybe 8%. Right, or less, right? And I think this is where you can still have your 8% interest rate. You have a repayment. Why not, right?
This is really exciting. So we're going to go into our final comments, which are just 1 minute each. Fiona, why don't you start us?
Well, as I did say that Extolab, we are a solution platform, extolabs.com. And we're working with India right now for the whole part of the UPI to be able to actually bring technology to finance and upscale and up microcredits as well. But on that is also health data, on that is also food data, and you can utilize that. On the other side is you can use this technology to take something like, I'm also involved with a group called clinicom.com, and that does mental health analysis, and diagnostic is still done by the doctor, but the AI builds a digital twin of the human that needs and thrives and builds out their timeline so that they have an opportunity to thrive, so that they or their family or their community can be involved. Because I also, when we look at food security and we looked at that, the chances of like those Monsanto infested South, I'm thinking of these rice paddies in the South where the seeds were contaminated and they were families and farmers committing suicide. We also need to look at all aspects of it. If we can use AI and technology like Clinicom that helps to monitor and measure, just in America alone, we have a challenge with that. You mentioned diabetes. I mean, it's so much can be monitored with our AI. So Clinicom has a possibility to support so much of our lives, to monitor and also do it at $12 under FDA. It's approved in the US at $12 per patient per year. So it's not out there. It's accessible and it's very viable. And so my intention is to say that AI in multiple areas has its growth. We can do it together, but I'd love us to look at ethics and to value ourselves. Because I taught yesterday to a group of wonderful kids here in the UN and under the side of Davos. The youth, I don't want to see them sitting behind computers, being computer programmers. They need to go get their hands dirty, dig in the soil, know what the nutrient is, how to grow food, where they can help each other, keep their bodies physiologically moving and healthy, and so that we can also all have a much more optimized ability to thrive. Because yes, AI can help take part of us away of our workforce. What are we going to do next? Let's do it together.
So this is a great question, and you have to stay for the next panel because we're going to be answering some of those questions Fiona just posed. So final comments.
So what I want to bring into this is really taking also an opportunity of hope and like also like that talking about like the ethics of this, right? Like everybody who's here, everybody who's watching this is like, I do believe that people want to do like create a better planet, create a more inclusive planet. Like that a lot of people have interest in that regard. so before actually running this accelerator for the World Food Program, I co-founded an app, Share the Meal, which is like kind of micro donation app. For $80 you can share your meal with a child in need. And like that sounds like very small, but you know, together there's 250 million meals that have been shared so far. So like you can actually do a lot of things that you can do together. Now, talking about the opportunity here in Davos is like, you know, you can actually do a lot more. You know, let's collaborate, let's actually work on something, you know, and if every one of the people that actually is here in Davos takes one action for, you know, maybe climate action or ending hunger, poverty, whatever it is, I think we can achieve something really big.
So for those who don't know, the theme this year at Davos is collaboration. And I think everything we've talked about today shows that we can't do this alone. We need to collaborate with each other and many partners. And so, dear audience back at home watching this live streaming, this has been a wonderful panel. If you'll help me in thanking our fantastic panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fiona, fantastic.
It's all one. Thank you.
Thank you.